Hello, I'm Charlotte Pike. I'm a cookery writer, teacher and chef. I'm going to show you how to make a roasted butternut squash, mushroom and spinach lasagna. First of all, I'm going to take a butternut squash and I'm going to cut it up and roast it in the oven. So I'm going to roast it at about 200 degrees and then put it in the lasagna once it's been roasted, and that will give it a lovely texture. So first of all, to slice a butternut squash, I like to cut the top off first of all, and then stand the butternut squash up straight, and then cut through using a sharp knife, like so. And with my hands on either side of the blade, it means that my fingers should be very safe. Now, I'm going to scoop out the seeds, and I'm just using a simple spoon. Now, the seeds are all extracted, so we can use all of this. So what I'm going to do is cut it roughly into 1 centimetre thick half moons effectively, and pop them on a baking tray I've got to the side of me. I'm going to just drizzle over a little bit of olive oil, and this will stop the squash from drying out. You could use sunflower or vegetable oil if you don't have olive oil. I'm going to put these slices into the oven now to roast for about half an hour. And I'm going to cook the mushrooms as well in advance before putting them into the lasagna, because again, the texture will be so much nicer. So I've got some mushrooms here I've already sliced, and these are brown mushrooms, so you could use portobello mushrooms, chestnut mushrooms. So what you want to do is to take your mushroom and cut it up into even slices. And I'm probably cutting these about sort of 7 millimetres thick. Doesn't matter too much, I'd say up to about 1 centimetre thick, but just make sure that you do the same thickness throughout your batch of mushrooms. So over here, I'm going to take a non-stick soto pan. You don't have to use a non-stick pan necessarily. And I'm going to add a good glug of olive oil to that. I'll add the mushrooms to the pan. This is 500 grams of mushrooms, so it looks like an awful lot, but they will really cook down as they fry in the pan. And the reason we're going to cook them first is not only will they cook down loads, so they'll fit really nicely into the lasagna dish, but also quite a lot of water is extracted from the mushrooms as they cook. And we want to get that out first before the mushrooms go in the lasagna, so that we don't end up with a watery end result. So this pan is going to go on heat over here, and they'll probably take about 10 or 15 minutes to cook down nicely. To that, I'm going to add a good pinch of ground black pepper and a good pinch of sea salt. If you don't have sea salt, then just standard table salt will be absolutely fine. I'm also going to add 2 cloves of garlic to the mushrooms. So what I want to do is to lightly crush and peel the garlic and chop it up into small pieces. So I have 2 cloves of garlic here. These are actually really quite chunky cloves, but that's fine. I'm going to stick my knife on top of the clove and crush it a little bit. Now, if you had a garlic crusher, you would just peel the garlic here and put it through the garlic press. But I'm going to do it by hand. So, peel off the skin, and that will be discarded. And then I'm going to cut off the little woody, rooty bit at the base of the garlic where the cloves attach to the bulb, and throw that away because it's a bit tough. And then simply I'm going to chop up the garlic like this. Now when the garlic's chopped, I'm going to pop that into the mushrooms, and what we'll do there is just cook those down together. And the mushrooms go first to get them started, followed by the garlic. I'll leave that for about 15 minutes, giving it a stir every minute or 2 until the mushrooms have really collapsed and any excess water has cooked off. I'll also need some spinach to go in the lasagna, and here I'm using frozen whole leaf spinach. I've got 250 grams here, And what I've done is I've taken the balls of frozen spinach out of the freezer and I've put them into a sieve sat over a bowl. And what I've done as they've defrosted is I've given them a press using a tablespoon, and that causes you to press out any excess liquid from the spinach. Again, same as the mushrooms, you want to get any excess liquid out before assembling the lasagna. So you can see how much liquid has come out of this. It's always a dark green with the lasagna, and that's just going to make it, with the frozen spinach, and that will make the lasagna look unpleasant. So I'm going to give this a nice little press until it feels quite dry. You can actually take the spinach in your hands and squeeze out any excess liquid into the bowl as well. You want to get it as dry as you possibly can before you use it. So give it a good squeeze and set it aside until you need it. Whilst the squash and the mushrooms are cooking, I'm going to make a white sauce, which is often known as a bechamel. And this sauce will go into the lasagna. So I have a smallish saucepan here, and I've added 25 grams of butter to that and melted it over a low heat. Now, if you need to make a dairy-free version, some kind of vegan spread will work very nicely here. I've got 25 grams of plain flour I'm going to add into the butter now. And I'm going to stir it together, and I find that a flat bottom spatula works particularly well here because it helps me to get into the corners of the pan. And I'm going to stir the flour into the butter until it looks smooth, and then return the pan to the heat. Now, over a medium heat, we want to stir the butter and flour together, and what will happen is that will thicken slightly, and it will take the rawness out of the flour. It will cook it as we go. So I'm just going to stir that over the heat, and it should start to bubble and thicken quite quickly. Now I'm going to add some seasoning. So I'm going to add plenty of black pepper. Black pepper works really nicely with the combination of ingredients, and a pinch of salt as well. And that will just make sure that it brings out the flavour. So the flour and butter mixture is starting to bubble, and I'm going to continuously stir it as it bubbles over the heat. And then what you do is you take some milk. I've got 300 millilitres of milk here. Again, the dairy-free milk will work. Often soy milk is quite good for cooking with instead of standard milk. So I'm going to pour this in a little bit at a time and stir after each addition. It will splat a little bit, but that's fine. And then you'll notice that the flour and butter mixture thickens really quickly. It is no longer a liquid. And then what you want to do is to keep adding the milk a little bit at a time. Stir really well. And the sauce will continue to look quite thick. So keep going in with the milk. It should bubble. And then you will notice after a couple of additions, it starts to look a bit lumpy. So now I've got all the milk in, what I want to do is to take my whisk and then whisk the sauce continuously for the next minute or two until the whole sauce starts to bubble and looks a lot thicker. Then I can turn off the heat and set it aside. So I've just taken these squash pieces out of the oven, and they are nice and tender, and they're slightly caramelised around the edges, so you can just stick a fork or a sharp knife into them to see how soft they are. I'm going to start to build the lasagna now before it goes into the oven. So I've taken a large oven-proof dish, and you can use any kind of dish you've got, be it Pyrex, enamel, ceramic. If you're really stuck, you can always use a roasting tin, maybe line it with some paper first. That will work. So use whatever you've got. The other option is always to use a foil disposable dish, because that will do the job really nicely, and that's very, very inexpensive to acquire. So I'm going to do a 2-layer lasagna dish here, and I've got my pasta to go with all of the vegetables I prepared, and this is a wholemeal pasta. These are lasagna sheets, and you can buy them made from white pasta or wholemeal. So I'm using wholemeal so that it's got lots more fibre and nutrition in there. So I'm going to put half of the squash, half of the mushrooms and spinach in one layer, cover it with pasta and the bechamel sauce, and then repeat. So I'm just going to use my fork to pick up the pieces of squash because they're still hot. There's no point in allowing them to cool down out of the oven because they'll just go straight back in again and they'll cook more efficiently and quickly if they are still hot. So I'll put roughly half the slices on the bottom. That's probably about enough. And I've actually got a few more here that I roasted in cubes to go into a salad with the skin on. And I'll pop those in as well because they need using up. But that's a really nice trick with squash as well, especially in the winter. If you want a more substantial salad, that works very nicely indeed. Spinach next. So I've got the spinach I've squeezed out. So it does sort of compact quite significantly when you squeeze it to get the liquid out. So all I'm going to do is just to break it into little chunks. You can use fresh spinach as well. That's totally fine. However, frozen spinach tends to be a bit more economical to buy, and also fresh spinach. You know, to get this quantity of fresh spinach, you'll end up with bags and bags of it, which takes up an awful lot of fridge space. So I'm just dotting my drained spinach over the top. I think you can see there. Now the mushrooms, these have cooked down really nicely. The water has cooked off and they're really nice and soft, and they've had garlic in there too. So I'm going to just put roughly half of the mushrooms in my pan over the squash and spinach and spread them out evenly. There we are. Doesn't have to be an exact science. Next, I'm going to cover the vegetables in pasta sheets, and 4 sheets seems to be about enough there. Press them down. And then I've got my cooked bechamel sauce with the milk, butter and flour that I've just stirred, whisked with the milk in, and then set aside. And it has thickened further as it's cooled down, so I'm just going to stir it because it can form a bit of a skin on top if it's left for too long, but that's nothing to worry about. So you can see that it's quite thick, and I'm roughly going to dribble half of it over the pasta sheets. And it's really important to do that, to put this over the pasta sheets, because the liquid in the sauce will help to soften the pasta as it cooks. So now we repeat. And to top it, I'm going to put 75 grams grated cheese on top. Now you can use the cheese of your choice here. So you could use a good cheddar cheese. You know, when I say good, I mean something with a bit of flavour. Or you could put Parmesan on top, Gruyere, any nice sort of flavoured melty cheese. So there's my cheese on top. And then if you wanted, you could add a few pine nuts. Now this is absolutely not essential, but nice if you've got some to hand. Pine nuts are expensive though, so don't worry too much if you haven't got them at all. And then I'm just going to give that a little wipe to tidy it up, and then pop that in the oven until it's all bubbling and golden. So I've just taken the lasagna out of the oven, and as I hope you can see, it's looking lovely and golden and bubbling. It smells absolutely wonderful. I've just taken a sharp knife and I've been sticking it into the lasagna throughout to make sure that the squash is tender, the pasta is properly cooked through, and it's ready to eat. As soon as everything's really, really soft, it's ready to serve. And all it really needs is a nice green salad to go with this. Take it to the table, and that is all you need to make for an absolutely delicious meal. So this is my roast butternut squash, spinach, mushroom lasagna.